Good afternoon, everyone. I suppose up until recent days, the Irish housing market had replaced the weather as the most topical discussion in the Irish population, but obviously the snow replaced that, but the snow is melting, so the housing market is still going to come back in stream in terms of where we are. So what I'm going to try and do today is maybe apply some of the tools of analysis that you are going through at the moment when you're doing economics or studying business in school, looking around supply and demand and how that relates to the Irish property market, and kind of apply it to real life issues and real life problems. So the first thing we talk about the housing market and what gets the most attention is house prices. So this chart here just looks at the upward move in house prices since we saw the recovery take hold in prices, because during the downturn in the Irish economy, prices fell from 55%. So from their high point to their low point, a fall of 55%. So what this chart here then just tracks the improvement from that. So the blue boxes or the blue bars reflect just month on month what's happening. So that's the momentum in the house prices. So compare one month to the following month, what's the growth rate? And then the red line looks at the year on year. So for example, it compares December 2018 to December 2017 and so on. So what that shows is that we've seen continued upward pressure on house prices, and the current rate of growth on year-on-year terms is close to 12%. Now, it had been as high as 22% back around the end of 2014. So this is what's getting all the attention, is, you know, house prices continue to rise. But at the same time, it's important to put it into context of, well, where are house prices now versus where they are at their peak levels. So that's what this next chart looks at. So it looks at the three key areas. So the national prices, that's the overall picture. And then Dublin, which is the green line, and the red line then is non-Dublin. So this is the way the CSO, in terms of its key high-level indicators, splits it out. So you can see there the peak was back around December 2006. So while you can see there the fall in house prices and the increase up from it, the key takeaway is that we're still not back close to those previous peaks. So we're about 72% from the low point of prices, but we're still about 24% from those peak levels. So even though we've seen over the last 3 years sustained increase in prices, we're still not back at those peak levels. So I suppose the key question then is, well, why are prices increasing so fast? And that's where we bring in the kind of supply and demand analysis to it. Now, what you'll learn if any of you ever go into economics is that applying something in a textbook or from a spreadsheet where you have perfect data is all good and well, but then real life issues and real life economic factors, sometimes data is an issue. And in the housing market, one big problem at the moment is just getting reliable data on supply. So the best available measure is what's known as housing completions, or they're now more recently termed ESB connections. So what this looks at is when a house gets connected to the ESB meter, it gets recorded as a completion. So it's not a perfect measure of housing supply, but it's the best measure that's out there in supply. So when you look at this chart, the key kind of takeaways is that back to the time of the boom and the bubble period in housing, we were building upwards of nearly 90,000 houses per annum, and then we saw a pretty substantial drop off. So back in 2010, 2011, you know, we were barely building 10,000 houses per annum. And you can see since then, housing supply is increasing, but the rate of increase is pretty modest. So last year we built just under 20,000 houses, and we expect gradual improvement out to 2020, getting up towards that 30,000 level. But the key thing is, so that's the supply side. So then when we apply the demand aspect to it as well, which is on the next chart, you can see then that over the last couple of years, supply has not been able to meet demand, and that's the fundamental issue in the housing market at the moment. It's a lack of supply. So there's more people out there wanting to buy prices than there is or wanting to buy houses than there is house available for sale. So you know your standard supply and demand axis, equilibrium when prices keep going up. Lack of demand, so a lack of supply and increase in demand all the time is pushing prices up, because the same amount, more and more people are looking for the same good, yet the same good is in short supply. And that's what this shows. So on average in the Irish economy, not based on how the economy is growing, but just based on underlying demographics, so in terms of household formation, because over 30% roughly of the population is under the age of 25. So like yourselves, in a couple of years, you'll be reaching this household formation category. So based on those demographics, the Irish economy needs to build in the region of 30 to 35,000 houses per annum. So you can see there in some of those years, we only built 10,000. As I said, getting out towards 2020, we get back towards meeting demand at that point. But another key aspect to it is that in 2020, 2021, at that point, the estimate is that we will build enough houses to meet demand in that year. But you still have all this pent-up demand that's been building over the last couple of years. So you're still looking probably into the middle of the next decade, 2025, before you can describe the Irish housing market as being anywhere near being in equilibrium, where we've met the gap that's been existed between the bars and the green line there, and on an annual basis we're meeting demand. So it's very much, in terms of houses, it's not like a tap. You suddenly can't turn it on. I suppose at the moment some people can't turn on the water heater, but it takes a long time to build houses. They don't come on stream immediately, so it's a while for supply to pick up. So this issue in the housing market and the lack of supply is still going to be there for some time to come. So Simon was talking about Brexit there. We'll probably be talking about Brexit for another few years, and likewise with the housing market and the lack of supply, that will very much remain an issue. So that's the demand and supply aspect of the analysis. So then if we look further ahead in terms of what does the future housing market look like. So I've kind of termed this from 2025 onwards, because at this point in time, some of you will have left college, maybe starting jobs, some of you will already been in work, and at that point in time you may be thinking about, well, am I going to buy a house? Am I going to rent? What does the housing market look like then? One thing we are seeing change in the housing market is that the amount of people owning houses versus renting is changing. So for a long time, home ownership in Ireland was about 70%. So there's roughly 2 million households in the country. And now what we're seeing is that that level of home ownership is falling. So it's gone below 70%, it's closer to 67% now, whereas the amount of people renting is increasing. It's probably gone up from 20% to 25%. So we're seeing less people owning houses and more people renting, and that's likely to continue going forward. So as the next decade emerges, we're likely to see more people renting than home ownership, but home ownership will still be the majority in terms of how households are occupied. But we're also likely to see maybe different new forms of ownership. So where traditionally now people buy a mortgage or get a mortgage to buy a house, going forward you could have like an idea of shared ownership schemes. So this is where you have a portion of a mortgage from a bank, but also maybe an investment fund owns another part, or a co-op owns another part of the house. So you don't have full ownership of the house, and maybe you pay a rent on that section. So the home ownership model may change. Also community type living. So when some of you start going to college, you'd be living maybe in accommodation if you're going to college outside of Dublin, where maybe you have a room but it's a shared kitchen. And in London at the moment, they're building apartments geared towards young professionals where what they have is a room rather than a full apartment in terms of a kitchen, and a kitchen is shared. So there's these different types of things that are starting to emerge, and maybe we'll still see some of it come into the Irish housing market over the next 10, 15, 20 years. Another key aspect as well is that the working arrangements going forward. So what we're seeing, all of us in the banks we work for at the moment, is more and more people working from home. So traditionally, you got up in the morning or you got up at night if you're on night shifts, whatever type of work you are, and you went out to work. But what we're seeing now with technology is more and more people can work from home or work remotely. So this is seeing increased numbers working from home. So this could impact then in terms of design, fit out of houses. Our houses built with, where you have an office space in it, high level, high technology broadband to allow you to work from home so that you're not commuting to work. And also then in terms of the types of homes being built. So we all think of a house or a home as, bricks and mortar, as they would say. But going forward, will we see new designs? Because the issue is lack of supply. So how do you increase the speed of house building? So do you look at prefabricated new designs, new materials being used to try and increase the build time and speed up the build time to get more houses on stream? Because in other countries, if you go to Germany or a place like that, it's timber frame houses. houses, different types of technology used in houses, rather than just traditionally here what we see in terms of cement and bricks. So, these are likely trends that we're going to see coming more into the housing market. And as I said, by the time maybe some of you start leaving college or are already working, these could be some of the factors that emerge on that. But for the foreseeable future, in terms of the next 5 years at least, the housing market is still all about supply and the lack of supply, and it's going to take time for that to come into equilibrium.